I'm hungry, so I'm gonna have my cornflakes in a cup. Cheers. So welcome to Port Lincoln. It's a little bit overcast today, but this is what they call the seafood capital of Australia. Known for lots of what they call aquaculture, or lots of fishing stuff, as well as agriculture. I'm here to talk to the locals as well as all the services in some of the schools about what they're doing to challenge homophobia. So we're here at West Coast Youth Services, where I've just spoken with a bunch of local youth workers about what life is like for lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender young people in the Port Lincoln region and also on the Eyre Peninsula. This is a perfect example of me going in to talk to people for about 15 to 20 minutes and have a cuppa about the work and the project that I'm doing. I would end up staying for around about 90 minutes, so there was a lot of discussion that went on. In particular, they were interested in Pride and Prejudice, a package I developed up in 2002. This year, in fact, there's going to be results published that show that Pride and Prejudice actually changes homophobic attitudes and behaviours, whilst also challenging and interrupting students' homophobic language. I guess the youth workers here are looking how they could apply that with the young people that they work with in their programs. A lot of what they were saying was that that's so gay is a really prevalent kind of term or statement that young people use, but what they're saying is it's also teachers and it's also workers in the region up to about the age of 30-35 who will also be using that terminology. So they're really keen to look at how that creates a more hostile environment for young people who are not heterosexual. So I met with the student counsellor here at Port Lincoln High School today. It's a perfect example how I rang up the day before and said, look, I'm in town, I'd love to speak to you sometime this week. Yeah, sure, come in, let's have a chat. This teacher spoke about the fact that about 5 years ago, there was a particular teacher who instigated, I guess, the staff looking at how to challenge and interrupt students when they said, that's so gay. Interestingly, that teacher spoke about how that really had an impact on the student culture, and it was really heartening to hear that this can happen in schools and not just schools in metropolitan areas. What I did observe though was the way that it was dealt with 5 years ago was through a very disciplinary approach. So students kind of got in trouble for doing it. I guess the way I would challenge and interrupt homophobia is more like I outline in my book, Beyond That's So Gay. Now, what I try and do with teachers is to get them to see it as not a disciplinary matter, but I guess an educational opportunity. So a way to engage young people and try and find out why they actually use the terminology, what it means to them, and talk to the young people about the impact that that kind of language can have on other students. Something that the welfare staff and the teachers are finding now, that even though they did something 5 years ago, as an example of where they said to themselves, tick, we've dealt with homophobia. What they're finding now is that that's so gay is becoming more prevalent again. And they talked about things like staff turnover. They talked about the fact that it's not something that's been a focus, that they're busy, etc. And this is an example I find in schools across Australia. This is something that you can't just sort of tick off and do once. You need to integrate it into the kinds of all the things that you do within a school. But overall, I found it a very welcoming school, and I found it really a really heartening example of what's happening today in regional Australia. The other thing that I'll say about the teachers, the schools, and the education department staff who I've spoken to is that all of them still seem to see this as an issue about sex. So when I talk to them about what are the opportunities or what are the challenges in schools, all of them talk primarily about it's about sexual health, it's about putting a couple of examples in a sexual health program. But as I put to the Department of Education staff, just because you provide examples as part of a kind of sexual health training, does that mean that teachers will go back and A, do the sexual health training, and B, if they do the sexual health training, will they provide examples of same-sex relationships, same-sex sexual activity, challenging homophobia, etc.? And most people are saying that that's an individual teacher's decision to do that. I find that problematic on a number of levels. One is that it's just seen as an issue of sexual health. I think that this has a lot more to do with social difference, gender roles within schools, and you know, we know that over 50% of bullying is related to homophobia, is homophobic in its nature. Thinking, look, if you do it, just pop it quickly into sex ed, and if a teacher feels for whatever reason that they don't want to do it, then they don't have to. Yeah, that's what I'm finding as I go around regional Australia. Good morning.
Good morning. Where did you come from?
I've just come from up the hill there where we're staying for the week in Port Lincoln, the seafood capital of Australia, and I have taken my bike on the road with me because not only am I trying to use less fuel, but I'm also trying to stay a little bit fit as well, so that was pretty hard. So here in Port Lincoln, I've been lucky enough to talk to some locals about their lives and what it's like to be gay, lesbian, bisexual and transgender down on what they call the Eyre Peninsula, which is where Port Lincoln sits. This is a really good example about one of the perks of my job. This is the kind of setting that I talk to locals about their lives. So rather than sitting in an office or behind closed doors, I actually get to sit out, you know, in the atmosphere along such a beautiful coastline. So that's a great thing. So behind me is the Port Lincoln Police Station, where I met with the former gay and lesbian liaison officer for the Port Lincoln area and also the Eyre Peninsula. He was quite frank in his discussions with me about how he supports young people in the region, what their lot in life is if they actually are gay or lesbian. He even talked about the interaction between sexual diversity and also Indigenous issues as well. So it was a highly interesting meeting. The other thing is that I've never had a meeting with anyone where I've heard the F word so many times, and that was really entertaining.